So moving on from clustering, now that we've thought about the performance, we've thought about clustering, what are the other things that we need to think about when we're deploying Yellowfin? And one of the most important things is disaster recovery and backup. So when building a system, and it's important to also note that the content needs to be backed up. You need to ensure that there's a sound backup procedure in place. But basically, the two main areas that you need to manage in disaster recovery are the reporting Yellowfin content, so your reports, your dashboards, your views, your sources, all the things that you need to basically protect, and also the repository database as well. The good thing is that Yellowfin is actually prepared as an application for actions such as these. So the Yellowfin content can actually be exported into XML files for migration and restoration purposes. So the items that can be exported, if you ask, are basically these things. So my data source, my views, my content categories and subcategories. So the areas that I save my content into, I can export that as well as reports and dashboards, images and maps I use in my geospatial reports, and storyboards and themes. So it's like say the storyboard here and this theme that I'm using, I can export that and keep that, and maybe even move that across to target instances as well. So the files that come out of this export process can be saved into your change management software, onto your version control process. So some clients like to use GitHub, or Subversion or CVS or Perforce, depending on what you have in your enterprise setup. You can simply save the files into that, label them, and as you wish, write certain things like scripts or an ant build framework that could do and move these things automatically as well. But again, that's probably a separate conversation. But again, you can see how it feeds very nicely into a change management process. So if you're wondering, how does an XML export file look like? It looks like the image here. So it's basically specified in a specific XML workflow, which Yellowfin recognizes. This bit over here is the XML export for a particular data source, which is why you see things like connection type code, database URL, and the usual things like platform type, connection timeouts, and all that good stuff. Note that when you export this content, the only security dependencies that are exported out as well are user groups or role security that's actually attached to the content. If you are saving things against a user level, we're not going to actually pass it on to the export file. So that means when you import it back to the target instance, if everything is driven by users, then you need to manually reconnect them at the target instance. Okay? So if you're wondering, where do I actually do this? How do I export and import this? Then that's actually done in the application here. And I can go to my illustration layer, and I can see the export and import features. So the exporting is for the first time. I can choose the item to export, choose what I want, and then choose the actual item itself. Right now I'm looking at data sources. I can go, I want to look at reports, and I want to choose a few different reports to export. And then now I want to choose maybe some themes, and then maybe some storyboards. Okay, and then once you're ready, click on Add, and it will generate a file for you. Right, so just coming back to the storyboard here. One of the things also before I leave this slide is that Yellowfin is actually smart enough to detect that whatever you're trying to export, if it's dependent on something, and it will actually ask you, would you like to also export some of these other things which we feel would be needed when you import into a target instance. For example, if you export a report, it depends on the view, it depends on the data source. Yellowfin will ask us about that, and if you forgot about it, then you can choose to add that as part of the step. Or if you already have a data source and view ready at the target instance, then you can choose to decline that warning. The next thing that should also be backed up is the actual repository that's powering the Yellowfin instance. All right, so it is advised that regular backups is scheduled according to your disaster recovery strategy. Usually, we also advise clients to back up the repository database before each major Yellowfin upgrade. It's just best practice, but one of the things that we have actually done for clients is we've actually started doing this automatically as part of the upgrade process. So each time you download a patch from a Yellowfin on the website, when you run that patch against your Yellowfin instance, it's going to automatically back up the root folder, which is the code base, into a zip file and place that into your Yellowfin backup folder. So if you actually go to your Yellowfin installation folder now, you would actually see a folder called backup. And if you've patched your instance before, you see quite a few zip files in there, depending on the day you've done it. And you can actually technically roll back to any steps before if you wanted to. Okay, so it's a pretty handy process that they've done for you. Now, the reason why people do repository backups also is if they actually want to move and do migration. And there are two ways to actually do migration here. So you can actually do a database migration where you're moving maybe content to dev, to test, to QA, to prod, let's just say. We usually recommend database migration if you're doing this for the first time. You just want to move everything you've ever done and you want to introduce this as day one to some other instance. You can do that by simply backing up to a Yellowfin repository on the source system, restoring that backup into a target system, so you unpack it, and in step 3, if Yellowfin is not installed, you can install it at the target instance into a temporary database, and then repoint in the web XML to your restored Yellowfin database. Okay, and then after that, you just simply need to load in the new correct license, so the target system license rather than the source system license in this case, and then have Yellowfin back online. Now, if Yellowfin is already installed, then you simply don't really need to do the first few steps. You just got to restore it and then just repoint Yellowfin via XML into your new repository. Okay, and then that's how we do database migration if we need to. There is also a way to move things on after I've done database migration. Say, in my version 2, in my version 3. Let's just say I want to bring in my delta changes and I don't really want to move databases across each time. Then you can take the export files you bring from one system to the next and simply import that as part of your migration process. As part of the import process, you can actually do modifications on the fly as well. So for example, if I'm bringing in my sales view and my sales data source from my source system and I'm bringing it to my target instance, maybe at a target instance my sales data source details have changed. Right, or maybe I want to use a different account at the back-end level. Then as I import is in, I can actually change the values there accordingly as well. When we're importing to Yellowfin, there's also additional code that actually detects what's needed before you do anything else. So it'll automatically try to import all the data sources in your export file first, followed by the views, followed by the reports and dashboards, then your content categories, and then your storyboards. It follows a workflow because it always tries to import the important things first that other things depend on, followed by the least important things. Okay, so it's a very nice workflow for you to work through when you import files into target instances. Okay, so you can see here that I've already gone past quite a few of these things and what are the different methods. Now, a lot of these things I'm talking about here, these two options, they can be automated as well. So coming back to the original model that I talked about, the Ant build framework or the scripts that people do, you can technically save all the export files as part of the backup process into a remote repository. And then when it's time to move content across the multiple systems, you can push a button and technically have a script run which grabs all these files and then implements the import process for the data source, the views, the reports, and so on and so forth. There is also, again, which isn't quite part of this lesson, a web services API library available for you to call these things programmatically. So technically, when you push a button, all the content can move from A to B, automatically, and then when you start Yellowfin up, it's ready to go. Okay, so just some of the ideas of how migration can work automatically as well. The last section, which is upgrades, is what are the things that we need to think about when we're upgrading Yellowfin, and what are the things that are important to maintain from go live forward. So firstly, make sure you ensure that you download the correct patch file when you add the Yellowfin folder, or I would say the latest builds page, because when you go to the latest builds page or when you go into the partner portal, we do support Yellowfin 7.1 as the latest version, but we do also support the previous version as well, which is 7.0. And you want to make sure that you actually download the right upgrade file. So some people have made mistakes before if they don't read it properly.
But ultimately on the page you will see something like this, where it would actually show what the update installers are, what date and what build they are, and for which particular platforms. Make sure you choose the right one. One's an exe file and one's a jar file for multi or I would say cross platforms, and you can simply just download that and apply it to your Yellowfin installation folder. Do note, as an important step, to stop your Yellowfin instance before you actually perform the action, as certain major versions and major patches actually do make database changes in the background. So it might add more columns or more tables. One of the things that you don't need to quite worry about is that we never take away columns which are in use, so we never do alter tables that way. We simply add to it, so you don't need to worry about that. But for actions like these, Yellowfin needs to be stopped for it to release connection pool and for it to do the changes that it needs to do.